I watched them lower his coffin into the ground. But I never saw his face. It was cold that morning, the kind of sharp, bitter cold that bites through your jacket and settles in your bones. I remember my shoes sinking into the soft dirt, the smell of wet grass and flowers masking something deeper, something final. People surrounded me in black faces I barely recognized, whispering condolences. Patting my shoulder like that would somehow patch the hole that had just torn through my chest. I was 12, old enough to understand what death meant, too young to understand why it felt like something was missing. They said it was a boating accident, a storm out at sea. No body recovered, just some wreckage, a few personal items, and an assumption that Daniel Wyatt, my father, was gone forever. But even then, even as they handed me a folded flag and told me to be brave, I couldn't bring myself to cry. Not at the funeral, not at home, not when the nights grew too quiet and my mom fell apart behind closed doors. Because somewhere in my gut, something kept whispering, this isn't real. Maybe it was the way everything happened so fast. One day, he was here teaching me how to fix a bike chain, sneaking hot chocolate past bedtime, whistling old rock songs in the kitchen, and the next he was just gone. No goodbye, no warning, no body, just a closed casket sealed shut like a secret. People said it was too damaged to open, said it was better this way. I didn't believe them, not really, but I played along because everyone else did, because grief has rules, and I didn't know how to break them yet. My mom spiraled. She quit her job, sold the house. We moved in with my aunt on the other side of town, and our lives folded into something smaller, quieter. She barely spoke for weeks, just stared out the window, chain smoking and rereading old letters he'd written her. I would listen to her sob in the bathroom at night, muffling the sound with a towel, thinking I couldn't hear, but I did, and I hated that I couldn't do anything to stop it. I hated him for leaving us, hated the ocean, hated God, hated myself for being too weak to ask the question that haunted me every night. What if he's not really dead? I held on to that thought like a secret thread connecting me to him. Maybe he got amnesia. Maybe he was rescued but didn't remember who he was. Maybe he faked it. Maybe he ran. I built stories in my head, wild, desperate ones just to survive the silence he left behind. I'd imagine him on an island, or working as a mechanic under a fake name, waiting for the right time to come back. Sometimes I'd write him letters I never mailed. I kept one under my pillow for 2 years. It started with, Dear Dad, I still remember how you laugh when you burn toast. Years passed. I got taller, angrier. The world kept moving like it didn't. Oh, me answers. My mom remarried when I was 16. I hated him, the new guy. Always trying too hard, laughing too loud, stepping into shoes he had no right to wear. I acted out, picked fights, skipped class, did whatever I could to remind people that I was still broken, still waiting for something. But the truth is, part of me had stopped hoping. The older I got, the more foolish it felt to believe in ghosts. And then the envelope arrived. It was a Thursday. I remember because I had just gotten home from work, kicked off my shoes, and collapsed on the couch when I saw it, thick, cream-colored paper with no return address. My name printed in gold ink. I thought it was a wedding invite from a cousin or maybe one of Mom's church friends. But when I opened it, the world shifted on its axis. You are cordially invited to the wedding of Daniel Wyatt and Clarissa Bell. I blinked, read it again. Then again, my heart slammed against my ribs like it was trying to escape. Daniel Wyatt. My father, dead, buried, gone. That Daniel Wyatt. His name, in full, printed in delicate script like it belonged in some fairy tale. The date was 2 weeks away. The location, a vineyard in Oregon. No note, no explanation, no hey, I know this. Might be shocking. Just a neatly packaged invitation like nothing had ever happened. I sat there for a long time, the envelope trembling in my hands. My mind sprinted through every possibility. A prank. A coincidence. Someone with the same name? But deep down, I knew. That gut feeling I'd buried beneath years of silence and forced healing came roaring back like a flood. He was alive. My father, the man who left me in a cemetery with a folded flag and a coffin full of lies. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the invitation like it held the secrets of the universe. Part of me wanted to rip it to shreds. Another part wanted to scream. But mostly I felt numb and betrayed. Not just because he was alive, but because he didn't reach out, didn't explain, didn't even try. He just sent an invitation like I was some distant acquaintance, someone he barely remembered. But I remembered everything. The way he used to say, I'll never leave you, kiddo. The way he smiled when he strummed the first chords of Sweet Child O' Mine. The way his eyes crinkled when he laughed. And now, he was getting married to someone new, with a new life, a new story, a new lie. I stood up slowly, the invitation still clenched in my fist. My legs shook, my breath came shallow. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a grieving son, I felt like a ticking time bomb. And in that moment, I knew one thing for sure. I had to go to that wedding, not for closure, not for forgiveness, for the truth. I didn't sleep that night. The envelope sat on my nightstand like it was staring at me, waiting for a reaction I couldn't give. I turned it over again and again, inspecting every crease, every corner, like it would suddenly reveal a secret. A note tucked beneath the RSVP card, a scribbled message on the flap. But there was nothing, just my name printed in that soft golden ink, and the name of a man who was supposed to be dead marrying a woman I'd never heard of, Clarissa Bell. Who was she? And how long had he been living this second life, this lie? Duh. Next morning, I called in sick. I told my manager I had the flu, but the truth was uglier than that. I was spiraling. For the first time in years, I pulled out the old photo albums, the ones I hadn't touched since I was a teenager. Dust clung to the covers like time refusing to let go. I flipped through page after page of smiles frozen in time, me on his shoulders at the county fair, his arms around my mom at Christmas, his hand guiding mine as I lit my first birthday candles. He was there in every memory, and now I couldn't look at a single picture without wondering how much of it had been real. Had he been planning to disappear even then? Were those smiles genuine, or rehearsals for a farewell he'd already decided? I tried calling my mom, not to tell her not yet, but just to hear her voice, something solid to hold on to. She picked up after the third ring, cheerful at first, asking how I'd been, if I'd eaten, if I was still seeing that girl from the bookstore. I told her no, we broke up a month ago. I didn't tell her why, because I'd stopped letting anyone get too close, because I'd always feared they'd leave the way he did. She asked if I was okay. I told her I was fine. And then I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. I spent the next few days doing everything and nothing. I Googled the Vineyard Belmont Estate, nestled in the rolling hills of Oregon wine country. 5 stars, known for its weddings, beautiful location, private security, luxury rooms, a dream venue for a dream couple. I scrolled through the pictures on their website, and my chest tightened when I saw one that looked recent, a man in the distance, helping set up chairs. He was turned away from the camera, but I'd know that frame anywhere. The slope of his shoulders, the stance. Even after all these years, I could still recognize the way he carried the weight of the world on his back. I zoomed in, even though it blurred. It didn't matter. That was him. My father, alive. I didn't know what I wanted to do. Crash the wedding? Confront him in front of everyone? Or just show up and watch quietly to confirm the truth with my own eyes? Part of me screamed for justice. Another part just wanted answers, closure, an apology maybe, a reason for why he chose to leave his 12-year-old son at a gravesite and disappear into another life. Booking the flight was strangely easy. Just a few clicks, round trip to Oregon. I chose a seat by the window like I always used to when he flew with me as a kid. He'd tell me to watch the clouds, they look soft but could tear a plane apart, he'd say with that half smile. I remember thinking he knew everything back then, that he could fix anything, that he was unbreakable. Now I knew better. As I packed my bag, I kept wondering what I'd even say if I saw him. Hey Dad, how's life after death? Or maybe I'd say nothing. Maybe I'd let him see me and let the guilt do the talking. But there was one thing I did know: I wasn't going there to ruin his wedding. I wasn't going to start a scene or make a fool of myself. I just wanted to stand in front of the man who shattered my life like it was disposable and ask, why? 2 weeks passed, both quickly and unbearably slow. I counted the days like seconds, and yet each one felt like it dragged me further into some surreal, twisted reality. I didn't tell anyone. Not my friends, not my mom, not even my therapist. This was my burden, my secret resurrection. When the day finally came, I stood at the gate, ticket in hand, heart thundering like it might tear itself free. I kept checking my phone, expecting another envelope to arrive, one that said it was all a mistake, that there'd been another Daniel Wyatt, that someone would stop me. But nothing came, just the final boarding call and a silent dare from the universe. Go. The flight itself was a blur. I don't remember what they served or who sat next to me. All I could do was stare out the window and imagine what I'd say. I tried rehearsing it, over and over, but every version ended the same, with silence. There were no words strong enough for what I carried. When the plane landed, I felt like I'd stepped into someone else's dream. The airport was small, quiet. I took a cab through winding roads, past green hills and tall trees, until the vineyards came into view. Rows upon rows of grapevines stretched like veins across the landscape, leading toward a villa that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Belmont Estate. The sign was carved into old stone, elegant and bold, just like the invitation. The driver dropped me off at the guest entrance. I stood there for a moment, suitcase in one hand, invitation in the other, and felt the full weight of the moment settle on my shoulders. Somewhere inside that estate, The man I had mourned for 12 years was laughing, breathing, building a new future without ever looking back, and I was about to walk into his fairy tale, not as a son, not as a guest, but as the living reminder of everything he buried. He walked out of the villa in a linen suit, laughing like nothing had ever happened, like he hadn't faked his death and buried the boy who used to call him dad. The sun cast long golden beams over the vineyard as if trying to make the day perfect. But all I could feel was the crackle of something shattering inside me. There he was, alive, breathing, his arms loosely wrapped around a tall woman in a silk dress who looked like she belonged on the cover of a bridal magazine. Her hand rested easily on his chest, and he leaned into her with the casual intimacy of someone who'd been loved and forgiven for far too long. My knees threatened to buckle. For a moment, I honestly wondered if I was hallucinating. Maybe I had finally lost it. Maybe I was sleepwalking through the worst dream of my life. But then he turned slowly, laughing at something she whispered, and I saw him. Not from behind, not from a blurry photo, but face to face. My father. Daniel Wyatt. His hair was grayer now, thinner in some places. His skin was more lined, more lived in, but his smile. That smile was still his. The one I used to wait for at the door when I'd hear his keys jingle. The one that used to make everything feel safe. And now it was on full display like a trophy he didn't earn, shared with strangers who had no idea what he'd done. I couldn't move. I just stood there, tucked in the shadow of a marble column near the reception hall, watching the man I'd buried 12 years ago sip champagne and entertain guests like he was born for this life. And then his eyes met mine. It was so quick, it almost didn't register. But it hit him like lightning. The smile froze. His grip on the woman's hand loosened. His posture, once confident, relaxed, stiffened like his body had just registered. A hit. For a long second he didn't move. Neither did I. We stared at each other like ghosts at a both of us caught in the act of haunting, but where I expected guilt or sorrow or some shred of humanity in his eyes, I saw something else entirely. Fear. Not the kind you feel when you're caught in a lie, but the kind that says, you weren't supposed to be here. He whispered something to Clarissa, handed her his glass, and started walking toward me, slow and cautious, like I was holding a detonator he couldn't see. Each step he took made the blood drain from my face. My heart pounded like a war drum. Every part of me screamed to run, to shout, to grab a chair and hurl it across the lawn and scream, you lied. But I didn't. I waited. I let him come to me. Watched him wrestle with the truth in his head as he approached the living wreckage of what he left behind. And when he stopped in front of me just a few feet away, I could see it all. The years, the weight, the choices, they hung on him. Like invisible chains. His mouth opened, and for a second I thought he might cry, or hug me, or say something that would make any of this make sense. But what came out shattered whatever illusion I had left of who he used to be. You. You weren't supposed to find me. That was it. No apology, no explanation. No I missed you or I'm sorry for everything. Just those 8 words, drenched in fear and regret and cowardice. I stared at him, waiting for more, anything, but he just stood there, helpless and cornered. And suddenly I realized something. He wasn't sorry he disappeared. He was sorry he got caught. So it's true, I said, my voice barely more than a whisper, but it landed like a punch. You faked your death. His eyes darted away, scanning the courtyard. No one was looking. People were still sipping wine, snapping selfies, taking in the sunset. Oblivious, he reached for my arm. Like he could fix this with a gentle touch, but I stepped back. I didn't want comfort. I wanted the truth. We need to talk, he said. Not here, not now. When then? I asked, and my voice cracked with rage, with grief, with the 12 years I spent holding my breath after the cake. After you kiss your new wife and pretend you don't have a son who buried you in the 3rd row of Green Hills Cemetery? That made him flinch. Good. Let it hurt. He deserved every ounce of pain. There are things you don't understand, he said, voice low and urgent. I did what I had to do, for your safety, for hers, for mine. You don't get to say that, I snapped. You don't get to decide my life for me and then vanish into some fairy tale. His eyes softened for a split second. I never stopped thinking about you, I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was pathetic. You stopped being my father the day you let them lower an empty coffin into the ground. Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Finally, he looked down. Meet me after the reception, behind the wine cellar, I'll explain everything, please. And just like that, he turned and walked back toward the villa, toward his new life, his new family, and the ceremony that was never supposed to include me. I stayed frozen, heart splitting into pieces I didn't know I still had. Part of me wanted to leave right then and there, to erase him all over again. But the other part, the one that had waited 12 years for this, needed answers. Needed to hear why a man would kill his name, kill his legacy, and kill the heart of the son who once thought the world of him. I looked up at the sky, that Perfect golden hour wrapping everything in false warmth, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't know who I was, son, stranger, or ghost. My death wasn't an accident, he said, his voice barely more than a whisper. The kind that makes your skin crawl not because it's soft but because it holds too much truth. We sat under a twisted oak tree near the edge of the vineyard. Far from the reception and the shocked guests and the wreckage he called his life. He couldn't look at me at first. Just stared at the distant hills like he was watching a memory burn. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My hands were clenched. So tightly my knuckles had turned white. My pulse thundered in my ears. He finally turned toward me, the father I buried 12 years ago, now flesh and blood and painfully alive, and said the one thing that shattered whatever was left of my ability to hate him cleanly. It was my escape plan. At first. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so pathetic I didn't know what else to do. He explained everything then, in slow pieces like a confession he had been practicing for years. The debts, the threats, the people he owed money to, and the people who wanted something far worse than money. He was deep into something. Something dangerous, illegal, something that could have swallowed us both whole if he hadn't disappeared. They weren't just after me, he said. They wanted leverage. They wanted my family, and I couldn't protect you. Not like that, so he staged it. The boat, the wreckage, the empty casket. He made it all look real. Hired people, paid off others, disappeared from the world like a magician sealing his final act. But you didn't just vanish, I snapped. You let me grieve, you let Mom break into 1,000 pieces. You let a 12-year-old boy cry into a folded flag thinking his father died for real. His eyes welled with tears, but I didn't care. I didn't want emotion. I wanted answers that could undo years of damage. I wanted to reach out, he said, voice cracking. God, I wanted to. I watched from a distance. I knew when you started high school, when you got into college. I saw your first car. I knew. When you broke your arm in sophomore year, I almost walked into that hospital. I almost said something, but I couldn't risk it. You did risk it, I said, my voice rising. You risked everything the moment you gave up being my father. He looked like I had slapped him, and maybe I had, just without lifting my hand. You don't get to come back from the dead and ask for forgiveness, I said. You don't get to hold your own funeral and then build a vineyard while your family learns how to live with a ghost. He swallowed hard. I know, he whispered. Then why now? I demanded. Why a wedding? Why invite me like this? Was this your redemption tour? I didn't invite you, he said. Clarissa did. I told her everything last year. About you, about what I'd done. She said if we were going to start a new life together, it had to be honest. So she tracked you down, sent the invitation herself. I didn't think you'd come. So you were going to get married, I said slowly, and still keep me in the shadows? No, he said. I was going to tell you. After, I didn't know how to face you. I didn't know if I deserved to. We sat there in silence. Wind rustling the leaves above, both of us choking on years we'd never get back. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something I hadn't seen in over a decade, a tiny, worn-out leather pouch. He placed it in my hand. Open it, he said. Inside was a stack of old photographs. Me, as a kid, at prom, at graduation. All taken from a distance, some blurry, some clear. My first day of college, standing with my mom. A photo of me holding a dog I didn't even know he'd seen. I flipped through them slowly, anger and sorrow and confusion folding into something quieter, something deeper. I never stopped being your father, he said. I just wasn't allowed to show it. But you chose that, I whispered. You chose to run. He nodded. And I'll live with that for the rest of my life. I should have walked away then. I planned to. I thought I could stand up, toss the photos back at him, and never speak to him again. But just as I rose from the bench, something inside me stopped cold. A car pulled up near the edge of the vineyard, black, tinted windows, no license plate. And in that split second, the look in my father's eyes changed from regret to fear. Get inside, he said, his voice sharp and urgent. Now, who is that? I asked. They found me, he said. It's not safe. Who found you? But he didn't answer. He grabbed my wrist and pulled me back toward the main house, his body moving faster than I'd seen him all day. And that's when I realized the past wasn't just returning. Emotionally, it was returning physically, the people he ran from. They were still watching, still waiting. And now that I knew the truth, I was part of the story, whether I wanted to be or not. When the priest asked, if anyone here has reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace. I didn't plan to stand, but I did. My body moved before my brain could stop it, rising like something ancient and involuntary had been living inside me this whole time, just waiting for this moment. The entire courtyard stilled. The guests, once buzzing with laughter and champagne and soft wedding music, turned in slow motion. Clarissa's smile faltered. My father, no, Daniel, because Dad no longer fit, froze at the altar, the color draining from his face like he'd seen a ghost. And in a way, he had. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The silence did the work for me. The groom died 12 years ago, I said, clear and sharp. I know because I buried him. He's my father. Gasps broke through the crowd like a wave crashing against a cliff. Clarissa's bouquet slipped from her hands and hit the stone path with a soft, tragic thud. The priest stammered something. But the moment had already shattered. Eyes darted between me and the man at the altar, trying to make sense of it. Daniel looked like a man unraveling in real time, his jaw clenched, his mouth slightly open, but no words came. For a moment we just stood there, two strangers connected by blood and betrayal, surrounded by flowers and lies. You told me. You died, I continued, my voice steadier now, like every word was stitched together by 12 years of silence. You let me grow up thinking you drowned. You let Mom bury an empty coffin. You disappeared and started a new life while we were still picking up the pieces of the old one. Daniel stepped forward, hand raised as if to explain, to beg, but I stepped back. Don't, I said. Don't pretend this isn't exactly what you planned. The guests whispered, now pieces of the story falling into place, confusion turning into disgust. One woman in the front row stood up and walked out. Others followed. Clarissa, to her credit, didn't scream or cry. She just stared at him like she'd never really seen him before. And maybe she hadn't. Maybe none of us had. Why now? She whispered, not to me, to him. Why now? He opened his mouth, and finally the truth poured out, desperate and cracked. He talked about the debt, the threats, the people he owed, the danger he thought he was protecting us from. He said it was never supposed to be permanent, that he watched from a distance, that he loved us the whole time. He swore it was for our safety, that if he'd stayed we might have been hurt, that faking his death was the only way out. But every word he spoke sounded like a coward's lullaby, a bedtime story to make monsters go away. I looked around at the wedding he'd built on the ruins of my childhood. The pristine vineyard, the gourmet catering, the string quartet still frozen in confusion. I thought about all the birthdays he missed, the graduation he didn't show up for, the nights I cried into my pillow asking why he never said goodbye. And suddenly, I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the letter I wrote that morning, sealed in a plain white envelope, with nothing on it but one word: goodbye. I walked to the altar, past the wilted flowers, past the shattered silence, and placed it on the table next to the unity candle that would never be lit. You chose to disappear, I said. Now I'm choosing to live, and I walked out. I didn't look back. Not when Daniel called my name. Not when Clarissa sobbed. Not when the guests murmured and shifted and filled the space with their discomfort. I just kept walking past the vineyard gates, past the waiting valet, past the future I once thought I wanted. The sky was overcast now. The sun had dipped behind a curtain of gray, as if even it was ashamed to shine on what had just happened. I stood at the edge of the parking lot, breathing in the cold, damp air, and for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel. Peace. Not because I'd ruined his life. I didn't come to destroy anything. I came to unbury myself. I came to take back the truth. The ride to the airport was quiet. I didn't speak. The driver didn't ask questions. I watched the vineyards disappear in the rearview mirror, slowly swallowed by hills and trees and silence. My phone buzzed once, Daniel, then again. A message. I didn't check it. I didn't need to. I knew what it would say. I'm sorry. I hope someday you'll understand. But I understood more than he thought. I understood that people who leave don't always mean to hurt you, but they still do. I understood that grief doesn't go away when you find the truth. Sometimes it just shifts shape, and I understood that I didn't need his answers to move on. I just needed the courage to walk away. On the plane, I sat by the window again. Same sea-tide book 2 weeks ago. Same sky. Same clouds. But this time, something was different. I wasn't flying toward a ghost. I was flying back to myself. And as the wheels left the runway and the world got smaller beneath me, I finally let go. Not of him, not of the pain, but of the hope that he'd ever be who I needed him to be. And in that release, I found something better: freedom.